A few centuries ago, an accusation of witchcraft was a definitive death sentence. If targeted, a person could expect to be ruthlessly persecuted, tortured, and burned at the stake. During this tumultuous era, heresy and black magic were simply not tolerated by society. Religious and legal authorities united to systematically eliminate any perceived threats to the established order. Yet a closer look at historical records reveals a deeply tragic reality. Many of those who met a fiery end were totally innocent of any malicious crimes. These individuals did not possess supernatural powers or consort with dark spirits. Instead, they died purely because of their religious beliefs, personal nonconformity, or local misunderstandings. The sheer scale of the panic transformed ordinary communities into hotbeds of fear. Paranoia overrode logic, turning neighbor against neighbor in a desperate bid to survive the hysteria. To fully understand this dark chapter, we must examine the strange anomalies left behind. History has preserved many incredible, revealing details about the mechanics of the witch trials. These accounts expose the fragile boundaries between medieval superstition and institutional justice. They show how easily a society can weaponize fear to destroy its most vulnerable citizens. Here are 27 interesting facts and anomalies about witches and witchcraft that will have you spellbound. Prepare to journey into a history where truth is stranger than fiction. For centuries, the specter of the witch haunted the Western world. Yet history reveals that those condemned possessed no real magic, dark pacts, or supernatural powers. The terrifying panic was fueled not by genuine sorcery, but by intense religious rivalry. During the Reformation, Catholics and Protestants weaponized accusations to eliminate dissenters. Tragically, the vast majority of victims were entirely devout Christians. Their only crime was practicing their faith outside the shifting boundaries of state-approved orthodoxy. In Romania, Italy, and across Europe, harmless traditional folk healers were suddenly reclassified as heretics. Secular courts, eager to maintain order, readily condemned them. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum provided a legal blueprint for persecution. This text transformed harmless ancient cultural traditions into evidence of a literal conspiracy with the devil. Under the agonizing pressure of torture, innocent citizens confessed to impossible crimes. Neighbors turned on one another, destroying communities to save their own lives. While New England hangings captured the modern imagination, Europe chose burning. Tens of thousands of ordinary people perished in the flames of institutional paranoia. The witch trials finally ended when reason overtook religious hysteria. Today, history judges these executions not as a battle against evil, but as deadly intolerance. From the mid-1400s through the early 18th century, Europe was consumed by a deadly obsession. A wave of institutional hysteria transformed ordinary communities into hunting grounds for suspected witches. Innocent citizens were suddenly trapped in a climate of absolute paranoia. Anyone perceived as different, eccentric, or socially isolated became an immediate target for terrifying accusations of heresy. The criteria for identifying a witch defied all logic and reason. Ordinary physical traits, completely beyond a person's control, were weaponized by courts as definitive proof of guilt. A simple birthmark, a prominent wart, or a squinting eye was reinterpreted. Inquisitors claimed these common physical blemishes were the literal, physical marks of a pact with Satan. Even a hairy lip or an unusual physical deformity could trigger an arrest. Neighbors watched each other closely, turning minor physical anomalies into death sentences to save themselves. Once accused, victims faced biased trials designed to secure confessions. The legal system offered no protection, assuming guilt based entirely on superstition and manufactured fear. Across Europe, tens of thousands of entirely innocent people perished. They were condemned to be burned alive at the stake for merely looking or behaving differently. The era remains a chilling testament to the dangers of unchecked mass hysteria. It proves how easily physical differences can be twisted into an excuse for deadly violence. The identification of a suspected witch often led to immediate and irreversible condemnation. For the unfortunate individuals marked by superstition, the legal process was merely a formality before execution. The preferred method of execution across continental Europe was burning at the stake. This horrific punishment was designed to satisfy a public hunger for justice and spiritual cleansing. Executions were staged as massive public spectacles, drawing crowds from across the countryside. Authorities used these grim displays to reinforce social order and strike fear into the community. The scale of the tragedy is staggering to modern historians. Estimates suggest that between 40,000 and 50,000 people were systematically killed during this period of madness. Most of those who perished in the flames were entirely innocent of any crime. They were victims of a legal system that prioritized religious zeal over empirical evidence. The agonizing death served as a final public act of purification. In the eyes of the courts, fire was the only way to truly eradicate the perceived heresy. While the flames have long since died out, the historical scars remain deep. These mass executions represent one of the darkest chapters in the history of human intolerance. Today, we remember the tens of thousands who lost their lives to hysteria. Their stories stand as a permanent warning against the dangers of unchecked state power. The era of organized persecution began in 1428. In the Swiss city of Valais, the first collective trial took place, setting a dangerous precedent for the centuries ahead. What started as localized panic quickly evolved into a continent-wide obsession. Across Europe, secular and religious authorities carried out witch hunts with alarming enthusiasm and brutal efficiency. The hysteria eventually crossed the Atlantic Ocean to the American colonies. In 1692, the small settlement of Salem, Massachusetts, became the site of the most infamous prosecution. The catalyst for the Salem Crisis was remarkably small. Two young, ill girls began exhibiting strange behavior, sparking immediate rumors of demonic possession and witchcraft within the community. As fear took root, accusations spread rapidly through the town. Neighbors turned on one another, and eventually, around 150 innocent people were rounded up. The legal proceedings in Salem lacked basic protections for the accused. Spectral evidence and forced confessions dominated the courtroom, ensuring convictions based entirely on mass paranoia. The tragedy culminated in the deaths of 18 local townsfolk. These individuals were put to death, their lives cut short by a community consumed by terror. The Salem trials remain a stark historical reminder of the past. They stand as a warning about the deadly consequences of unchecked fear and religious extremism. The long, dark era of state-sanctioned witch trials eventually drew to a close. By the late 18th century, the fires of institutional paranoia were burning out across Europe. The final chapter of this legal tragedy unfolded in Eastern Europe. In 1793, the last officially recorded execution of a suspected witch took place on Polish soil. This execution marked the end of centuries of systematic, legal persecution. Across the continent, modern legal systems finally rejected superstition in favor of empirical, rational evidence. Yet, the end of official trials did not mean the ideas disappeared. While the laws changed, deep-seated cultural anxieties regarding the supernatural continued to linger in many communities. In fact, the belief in sorcery survived far beyond the European continent. Today, the concept of witchcraft remains a powerful force in various cultures around the globe. In these societies, the cult of the witch is not a historical memory. Instead, it remains deeply integrated into the fabric of daily life, rituals, and traditions. Modern anthropological studies show how these enduring beliefs function in contemporary times. They often serve as a way to explain misfortune, illness, or unresolved social conflicts. The journey from historic executions to modern cultural practices is complex. It proves that while laws can change overnight, ancient human beliefs endure for generations. In 1487, a single printed text fundamentally altered the course of European history. It weaponized words, transforming ancient superstitions into a lethal, institutionalized system of persecution. This highly influential book was titled the Malleus Maleficarum. Usually translated as the Hammer of Witches, it became the definitive, most important treatise on the subject. The text was crafted by theological inquisitors with a specific purpose. It systematically defined the nature of heresy, dark magic, and the supposed threat of demonic conspiracies. More than just a theological guide, it served as a practical manual. It provided secular judges with specific legal procedures to identify, interrogate, and prosecute suspected individuals. The timing of its publication was critical to its massive success. The recent invention of the printing press allowed the book to spread rapidly across continental Europe. As copies multiplied, the treatise standardized the fear of witchcraft. It united different regions under a single, terrifying legal framework that left little room for defense. For nearly 3 centuries, magistrates relied heavily on its cruel instructions. The Hammer of Witches effectively legitimized torture, leading directly to thousands of wrongful executions. Today, the text is remembered as a devastating example of propaganda. It stands as a dark monument to how literature can be used to fuel mass hysteria. In the late 15th century, a chilling literary phenomenon took hold of Europe. A single book captivated the public imagination, quickly becoming an unprecedented historical bestseller. This influential text was authored by 2 prominent religious figures. The Catholic clergyman Heinrich Kramer and theologian Jacob Sprenger combined their efforts to codify the fear of sorcery. Their collaborative work provided a systematic guide to hunting witches. It offered a legal and theological justification that resonated deeply during an era of profound religious anxiety. Remarkably, the book's immense popularity transcended deep sectarian divides. It was read enthusiastically by both Catholics and Protestants alike, uniting bitter rivals under a shared terror. The invention of the printing press amplified the book's devastating reach. Thousands of copies circulated rapidly across towns and villages, standardizing the legal methods of persecution. For generations, magistrates and ordinary citizens turned to its pages for guidance. Its widespread acceptance transformed regional superstitions into a coordinated, continent-wide campaign of violence. The text effectively normalized the use of torture and execution. By convincing a literate public of a vast demonic conspiracy, it sealed the fate of countless innocent people. Today, this historical bestseller stands as a dark testament to mass manipulation. It proves how easily a written text can unite a fractured society through weaponized fear. The authored treatise introduced a horrifying narrative to the European public. It painted a picture of absolute malice, designed to evoke maximum terror and immediate moral outrage. According to the writers, suspected witches engaged in unspeakable atrocities. The text explicitly claimed these individuals would systematically kidnap young children from their homes and families. The fabrications grew progressively more graphic and sinister to shock readers. It was alleged that the victims were dismembered in secret, nocturnal gatherings away from society. Furthermore, the authors accused the suspects of participating in ritual cannibalism. This specific charge was carefully calculated to dehumanize the accused completely in the public eye. These sensationalized claims had no basis in historical reality or truth. Yet, presented as theological fact, they successfully manipulated the deep-seated fears of a deeply religious society. By portraying the accused as inherently sick and evil, the book closed any avenue for empathy. It made the use of extreme torture seem not just acceptable, but spiritually necessary. The legal system used these manufactured horrors to justify immediate execution. Ordinary citizens, consumed by panic, willingly believed the worst about their marginalized neighbors to protect their children. This dark chapter reveals the devastating power of malicious propaganda. It demonstrates how fabricated atrocities can be weaponized by authorities to fuel centuries of deadly persecution. The text described extraordinary and terrifying abilities to the accused. It convinced a fearful public that these individuals possessed absolute control over the natural and supernatural worlds. According to the treatise, suspected witches held the power of transformation. It was claimed they could instantly turn ordinary people into creatures like snakes or frogs. The authors also argued that these individuals could summon the devil. This direct line to Satan made them appear as an existential threat to Christian civilization. Furthermore, the book detailed the immense danger of a single look. It asserted that a suspected witch could cast deadly spells with just one piercing glance. Even massive natural disasters were blamed on their malicious intent. The public believed that these individuals could summon devastating plagues to destroy entire crops and communities. These sensationalized claims had no basis in scientific or historical reality. Yet, in an era of crop failures and disease, they provided a convenient scapegoat. The legal system fully accepted these supernatural powers as factual evidence. Consequently, ordinary citizens began to fear the looks and gestures of their most vulnerable neighbors. This dark chapter illustrates how easily superstition can weaponize human imagination. It shows how fabricated fears led directly to the tragic execution of thousands. During the height of the witch trials, deep-seated superstitions dictated daily life. The supernatural power of a suspected witch's curse was taken with absolute, terrifying seriousness by communities. This pervasive fear extended far beyond human suspects, deeply affecting the animal world. Ordinary creatures were suddenly viewed with intense suspicion as potential instruments of dark magic. Black cats, in particular, became the primary targets of this institutional paranoia. It was widely believed that these animals were actually sinister witches in clever disguise. Alternatively, they were feared as demonic familiars sent to assist in malevolent sorcery. Consequently, thousands of innocent felines were regularly and systematically killed across European towns. The eradication of these animals was seen as a necessary act of spiritual defense. Authorities and citizens believed that destroying the cat would break the witch's power. Tragically, this mass slaughter had severe, unintended consequences for public health. The massive reduction in the feline population allowed disease-carrying rodent populations to multiply completely unchecked. The resulting imbalance inadvertently contributed to the devastating spread of various plagues. A practice intended to protect communities instead brought them closer to absolute ruin. This historical episode illustrates the destructive cycle of unchecked superstition. It proves how easily irrational fears can warp human logic, harming both nature and society. The architecture of the witch hunts targeted a very specific segment of society. Demographics, rather than dark magic, often determined who would be accused of heresy. The individuals who most commonly fit this tragic profile were impoverished, peasant women. They existed on the margins of their communities, lacking institutional protection or social influence. Many of these women lived entirely alone in a deeply patriarchal world. Without a husband or family to defend them, they were uniquely vulnerable to malicious rumors. To survive, they scraped together a meager living through informal trade. They frequently sat by the side of the road, selling simple wares to passing travelers. Crucially, many also provided traditional homemade remedies to their neighbors. They possessed a deep knowledge of local herbs and plants used to treat common ailments. In times of health, these remedies were welcomed by the impoverished community. However, if a patient suddenly worsened, the healer was instantly blamed for using malevolent sorcery. The legal system easily transformed their poverty and isolation into evidence of guilt. Their simple lifestyle was reinterpreted as a cover for a sinister pact with the devil. This pattern reveals the true social dynamic of the historic witch trials. The victims were not monsters, but vulnerable women punished for their poverty and independence. The social reality of the historic witch hunts was deeply complex and contradictory. Within many traditional communities, certain individuals managed to carve out a unique position of survival. Despite their dangerous reputation, some suspected healers actually garnered a modicum of genuine respect. Their skills were often deemed essential by the local population they lived among. These individuals possessed a profound, generational knowledge of botany and nature. They carefully concocted various herbal medicines and liquid potions to address the community's daily needs. Their homemade remedies were sold directly to neighbors seeking relief from physical suffering. They provided affordable, accessible care in an era when professional doctors were entirely unavailable. The treatments were designed as practical defenses against common sickness and devastating disease. In a world without modern medicine, these traditional mixtures offered a vital lifeline. Furthermore, they created specific charms and potions meant to ward off spiritual threats. The local population relied heavily on these methods to protect themselves from the evil eye. For long periods, these healers coexisted peacefully alongside their fearful neighbors. Their practical contributions to public health often shielded them from immediate accusations of malicious heresy. However, this respect was always fragile, hanging by a very thin thread. If an epidemic struck or a patient died, gratitude instantly transformed into deadly paranoia. The social fabric of early modern Europe relied heavily on informal networks of care. Within these traditional societies, certain women occupied roles that extended far beyond simple survival. Incredibly, many individuals who were labeled as witches actually made a legitimate living. They provided essential services that supported the foundational health and well-being of their neighbors. Some of these women functioned effectively as early therapists for their communities. They offered counsel, listened to grievances, and helped resolve complex interpersonal and emotional conflicts. Others specialized in the critical, high-risk field of traditional midwifery. They guided mothers through the dangerous process of childbirth, ensuring the survival of the next generation. Because of their immense practical knowledge, they held a distinct social status. In many villages, they were formally recognized and respected as indispensable wise women. Their expertise in local herbalism and psychological comfort made them a vital resource. For generations, ordinary peasants turned to them long before seeking a university-trained doctor. Yet, this position of community trust carried an inherent and terrifying danger. The very knowledge that made them wise also made them objects of intense, deep-seated suspicion. When a harvest failed, a child died, or an unexplainable illness struck, admiration vanished. The revered wise woman could instantly be redefined as a malicious, demonic threat. Modern science has since validated much of the traditional botanical knowledge once persecuted. Many herbs utilized by historically accused individuals do, in fact, possess genuine, proven medicinal properties. For generations, these traditional healers carefully studied the natural world around them. They recognized that the local flora held the keys to treating common physical ailments and suffering. Sage, for example, was a staple of their traditional botanical remedies. It has been scientifically proven to help relieve colic and regulate proper, healthy human digestion. Other common plants were utilized to reduce dangerous fevers or soothe painful wounds. These natural treatments provided a vital source of care for impoverished rural populations. Tragically, this deep understanding of nature was frequently misinterpreted by authorities. What was actually early pharmacology was viewed by a superstitious society as a form of dark magic. A successful recovery from illness could easily trigger intense, deep-seated communal suspicion. The line between a helpful healer and a malicious sorcerer was terrifyingly thin and unpredictable. The legal system systematically weaponized this valuable botanical expertise against the vulnerable. Innumerable wise women were condemned to death precisely because their natural remedies actually worked. Today, history views these individuals not as practitioners of heresy, but as pioneers of medicine. Their enduring legacy survives in the foundations of modern pharmaceutical science. Contrary to popular belief, widespread torture never took place during the Inquisition. However, those accused of heresy were spared no mercy and were cruelly tormented into confessing acts of witchcraft. The inquisitors would first strip those accused of witchcraft to look for any moles, warts, or birthmarks. They believed these common blemishes surely indicated an association with devil worship and black magic. The legal system prioritized extracting a confession above all else. Once an accusation was made, the burden of proof shifted entirely, forcing the helpless suspects to prove their innocence. To the modern eye, these physical inspections defy all logic and medical science. Yet, in an era of intense religious anxiety, an ordinary mole became definitive proof of heresy. If a physical anomaly was discovered, it was labeled a devil's mark. Inquisitors claimed these spots were insensitive to pain and would not bleed when pricked with needles. Specialized investigators were employed to systematically test these marks across the victim's body. The agonizing process was designed to break the suspect psychologically before formal questioning began. Under the extreme duress of these humiliating searches, many innocent individuals broke down. They confessed to impossible, fabricated crimes simply to bring an immediate end to their torment. This dark methodology highlights the absolute paranoia that consumed the early modern courts. It remains a sobering historical reminder of how easily superstition can corrupt the administration of justice. For centuries, the modern celebration of Halloween has captured the global imagination. Yet, its true historical origins lie deep within the ancient, pre-Christian traditions of the Celtic people. This specific time of year was originally known as Samhain. It was a crucial seasonal milestone that formally marked the beginning of winter, or the year's darker half. The ancient Celts believed that during Samhain, the physical world changed. The boundary separating the living from the realm of the dead became uniquely thin and easily permeable. Consequently, the occasion was deeply associated with honoring deceased ancestors and spirits. Communities gathered around massive communal bonfires to offer protection from the encroaching, cold winter darkness. To confuse and evade wandering spirits, individuals began wearing elaborate disguises. They carved frightening faces into ordinary turnips, creating early precursors to modern holiday traditions and decorations. As Christianity spread across Europe, church authorities attempted to reshape these rituals. They established All Saints' Day, intentionally overlapping with the ancient, deep-seated Celtic calendar celebrations. Over generations, these distinct cultural and religious practices slowly merged together. The ancient pagan festival of Samhain gradually transformed into the secular, global holiday we recognize today. This transition from a solemn winter ritual to a modern festivity is remarkable. It proves how deeply rooted our contemporary seasonal traditions are in the ancient past. Every October, a unique and enduring cultural phenomenon captivates millions of people. Today, Halloween is celebrated across several countries, most primarily the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. The modern holiday is a vibrant tapestry of diverse traditions and customs. From trick-or-treating to elaborate costumes, it has evolved into a massive, multi-billion-dollar global cultural event. Yet, the true geographic heart of this celebration remains in Ireland. It was here that the foundational customs of the holiday were originally forged over thousands of years. The modern traditions we observe today are direct descendants of ancient practices. As waves of Irish immigrants crossed the Atlantic Ocean, they brought their deeply rooted folklore with them. In the New World, these ancient customs blended with diverse cultural influences. Over generations, the solemn autumn rituals transformed into the community-centered, festive holiday we recognize today. The UK and Ireland have also seen a dramatic resurgence in celebrations. Old folk traditions have gradually merged with modern, commercialized customs imported back from North America. Despite its global reach, the holiday's core themes remain remarkably consistent. It continues to serve as a designated time for communities to confront darkness with lighthearted festivity. The journey of Halloween from regional folklore to an international phenomenon is extraordinary. It demonstrates how ancient traditions can adapt, survive, and unite diverse cultures across the modern world. For centuries, the harvest season has been defined by the presence of pumpkins. These vibrant orange fruits have long served as central symbols for autumn traditions and Halloween celebrations. As our cultural rituals evolved, so too did our fascination with agricultural achievements. Across North America and Europe, local harvest festivals gradually transformed into competitive sporting events. Growers began pushing the absolute limits of nature to produce the largest possible yields. What started as simple county fairs evolved into intense, global competitions for massive size. In recent years, these dedicated horticulturists have shattered previous botanical expectations. The historic 2,702-pound record achieved in Italy showcased what precise engineering and agriculture could produce. That specific milestone, grown carefully in the fertile soils of Europe, stunned audiences worldwide. It proved that under perfect, dedicated conditions, a single fruit could achieve unimaginable weight. However, the pursuit of the ultimate harvest did not stop with that victory. Driven by competitive passion, modern growers continued to refine their agricultural techniques and daily routines. Subsequent international competitions saw that impressive weight barrier systematically broken by new challengers. The pursuit of the ultimate giant fruit became a celebrated annual tradition among farming communities. Today, these colossal crops stand as a testament to human ingenuity and patience. They demonstrate how an ancient autumn symbol can capture our imagination through extraordinary growth. The traditional image of the witch has long been fixed in popular folklore. We readily visualize a warty, hook-nosed crone in a pointy hat, riding a broomstick through the night. Yet history and anthropology reveal a far more complex reality behind this enduring archetype. Across many traditional societies, there existed practitioners who operated in complete opposition to this stereotype. These individuals were known for practicing what communities recognized as white magic. Their intent was not to cause harm, but to offer protection, blessings, and spiritual guidance to neighbors. Many were possessed of deep healing powers, utilizing a profound knowledge of local botany. They treated the sick, mended wounds, and filled the role of traditional medical practitioners. In many historical communities, these figures were actively considered do-gooders and essential allies. They were sought out during crises, providing comfort when modern medicine was completely non-existent. Their practices were deeply woven into the fabric of daily agrarian life and rituals. They helped ensure successful harvests, protected livestock, and countered the perceived threats of malevolent sorcery. Tragically, the rise of institutional paranoia slowly erased the distinction between good and evil magic. Legal and religious authorities began classifying all folk practices as dangerous, heretical conspiracies. Ultimately, the benevolent healer and the malevolent sorcerer were condemned under the exact same laws. This shift transformed valuable community protectors into tragic victims of widespread, unchecked hysteria. The legal machinery of the historic witch trials operated under a terrifyingly low threshold of proof. During the height of the panic, innocence offered absolutely no protection from condemnation. People could be routinely convicted of witchcraft on the flimsiest of evidence. The courts willingly accepted supernatural claims that defied all logical reasoning and basic physical possibility. One of the most dangerous legal concepts was the reliance on spectral evidence. This allowed subjective psychological experiences to be treated as concrete, indisputable facts in a courtroom. For example, dreams became a legitimate weapon used by the prosecution. If an individual merely ended up appearing in another person's nighttime dream, a crime had occurred. That simple, uncontrollable occurrence was legally enough to accuse the person. The dreamer's experience was framed not as a trick of the mind, but as a deliberate assault. The accused was charged with attempting to stealthily steal the mind of the sleeper. This invisible, spiritual violation was treated with the exact same severity as physical murder. Because dreams are entirely internal, defending oneself against such charges was completely impossible. A suspect could not provide an alibi for an event that took place inside a neighbor's head. This absurd standard of proof guaranteed a near-certain conviction for anyone targeted. It highlights a dark era where the boundary between reality and imagination was tragically erased by law. Language holds the memory of our deepest cultural shifts, carrying ancient ideas across centuries. To truly understand the history of persecution, we must trace the etymology of fear. The precise origins of the word witch remain shrouded in mystery and uncertainty. Linguists have long debated its roots, searching through the fragments of ancient European languages. However, the closest historical ancestor to the modern term has been identified. Scholars point directly to the Old English linguistic tradition to find its earliest, foundational meaning. In the early medieval period, the common spoken word was wiki. This specific term carried a very clear, descriptive definition within the communities of Anglo-Saxon England. In its original context, witchy translated precisely to female magician. Alternatively, it was used by speakers to describe an independent, recognized practitioner known as a sorceress. At this point in history, the term did not automatically imply absolute malevolence. It simply identified a woman who possessed specialized knowledge of rituals, nature, and unseen forces. As centuries passed and religious institutions grew more powerful, the language evolved. The neutral, traditional description of the wiki was slowly systematically reinterpreted by authorities as heresy. The linguistic shift mirrored the tragic fate of the women who bore the title. An ancient word for a knowledgeable woman became a lethal accusation, sealed in law. In 1484, the highest spiritual authority in the Western world took a decisive stance. A decree from Rome would forever validate the growing fears of the supernatural. Pope Innocent VIII issued an official papal bull on the matter. The document was solemnly entitled Summis Desiderantes Affectibus, reflecting the deep anxieties of the Catholic Church. Within this powerful decree, the pontiff made a historic declaration. He formally and explicitly acknowledged the active presence of witches operating throughout the known world. This was not a mere warning about abstract spiritual heresy. The Vatican recognized sorcery as a physical, organized threat to the safety of Christian society. The papal bull provided the crucial institutional backing that local inquisitors needed. It effectively silenced those within the Church who still argued that witchcraft was a delusion. By elevating the belief to official doctrine, the Pope legitimized widespread panic. The decree gave authorities the absolute right to hunt, arrest, and prosecute suspected individuals. This single document acted as the spark for centuries of violence. It set the stage for the publication of deadly manuals and coordinated continent-wide persecutions. History remembers 1484 as the moment superstition gained supreme legal authority. A papal decree turned a lingering folk belief into a deadly, institutionalized reality. The modern traditions of Halloween are recognized globally, but their roots remain deeply tied to a single landscape. In Ireland, this seasonal celebration has been observed for centuries. The true origin of the holiday traces back to an ancient past. It began with the festival of Samhain, a cornerstone of Celtic culture and spirituality. Historical records indicate that Samhain dates back over 2,000 years. It was a vital pastoral milestone, marking the end of the harvest and the start of winter. For the ancient Celts, this transition was more than a change in weather. It represented the threshold of the darker half of the year, a time of mystery. During this specific period, the boundary between worlds was believed to thin. The living prepared for the brief return of deceased ancestors and wandering spirits to the earth. To navigate this supernatural night, communities gathered around massive communal bonfires. These fires provided warmth, solidarity, and a sense of spiritual protection against the encroaching darkness. Over generations, these ancient pagan rituals slowly adapted to changing religious landscapes. Christian authorities integrated the traditions, transforming the eve into what became known as Halloween. Yet, despite centuries of cultural evolution, the core of the festival survived. Ireland preserved the foundational spirit of Samhain, passing it down through folklore to the modern world. Every October, a massive cultural shift takes place across the United States. What began centuries ago as a solemn autumn ritual has transformed into a colossal economic powerhouse. Today, Halloween stands second only to Christmas as the biggest revenue-generating holiday in the country. For millions of Americans, the annual celebration has become an incredibly big business. The scale of commercial activity during this season is truly staggering. Every year, consumers willingly spend huge amounts of money to fully participate in the festive traditions. A significant portion of this massive spending is dedicated to elaborate masks and intricate costumes. People of all ages eagerly transform their appearance for this single, special night. Confectionery companies also experience their most profitable period of the entire year. Tons of candy are manufactured and purchased to satisfy the endless demand of trick-or-treaters. Beyond individual purchases, the holiday drives a booming entertainment industry. Communities invest heavily in hosting lavish parties, haunted attractions, and large-scale neighborhood decorations. This economic evolution reflects a deeper cultural obsession with the autumn season. The desire to celebrate has successfully turned folklore into a multi-billion-dollar modern marketplace. Ultimately, the contemporary American Halloween is defined by this unique blend of fun and commerce. It demonstrates how ancient traditions can be entirely reimagined by modern consumer culture. Within the rich tapestry of Halloween folklore, specific rituals emerged for the daring. According to tradition, a precise sequence of actions could pierce the veil to the supernatural world. To encounter a suspected witch on this sacred night, unique preparations were required. An individual had to acquire similar robes and intentionally wear them completely upside down. The physical movement of the seeker was equally bound by strict ritualistic rules. Instead of advancing forward, they had to deliberately walk backward through the dark streets. Timing was the final, critical element necessary to unlock this ancient folklore mystery. This precise, unusual ritual had to be carried out exactly at the stroke of midnight. It was believed that this combination of inversion and timing created a spiritual doorway. If performed correctly, tradition held that you would surely meet a witch face to face. These folk instructions reflected a deeper human desire to control the unexplainable. In an era dominated by fear, such rituals offered a structured way to confront the unknown. Historically, these practices were passed down through generations by word of mouth. They transformed from serious, protective magic into the playful superstitions of modern autumn celebrations. Today, the witching hour survives primarily as a captivating piece of holiday lore. It reminds us of an era when the boundaries of reality felt dangerously thin. The history of the witch trials contains many tragic figures of immense renown. Yet, perhaps the most famous innocent person condemned under these laws was a French heroine. Joan of Arc lived a brief but extraordinary life between 1412 and 1431. Her actions during the 100 Years' War fundamentally altered the course of European history. Despite her devotion, she was captured by political enemies and put on trial. The court systematically branded her a malicious witch, a dangerous liar, and a heretical blasphemer. The hostile tribunal weaponized religious law to secure a politically motivated conviction. They twisted her claims of divine visions into definitive proof of a sinister pact with the devil. Consequently, she was condemned to face the most painful and public execution possible. She was burned at the stake in a crowded marketplace, aged just 19 years old. Her tragic death in the public square was intended to completely erase her legacy. Instead, it solidified her status as a profound symbol of resilience and unjust suffering. The political landscape shifted, and the truth of her trial was eventually re-examined. 25 years later, in 1456, a formal rehabilitation trial was officially opened in Rome. Upon review, she was formally declared completely innocent by Pope Calixtus III. Centuries later, the Catholic Church recognized her legacy, elevating her to a Roman Catholic saint. The enduring imagery of the historic witch trials has created a powerful, lasting impression. In popular culture, a witch is primarily and almost exclusively associated with a woman. Yet, a closer examination of historical records reveals a far more complex gender dynamic. Men, too, have been branded as witches, or rather categorized as warlocks, by authorities. In certain regions of early modern Europe, the demographic realities defied the common stereotype. In places like Iceland and Normandy, men actually comprised the majority of the accused. The legal machinery of the panic did not discriminate based on gender alone. Anyone who fell outside societal norms could easily find themselves targeted by intense communal suspicion. Men who practiced traditional folk medicine or unapproved rituals faced immediate danger. Their specialized knowledge of nature was quickly reinterpreted by courts as a pact with demonic forces. Political rivalries and economic disputes also fueled these malevolent accusations. A simple disagreement between neighbors could escalate into a lethal charge of practicing forbidden, heretical sorcery. Once entangled in the judicial system, these men faced the exact same fate. They were subjected to harsh interrogations, forced confessions, and the ultimate penalty of execution. The history of the trials proves that paranoia knew no gender boundaries. It remains a stark reminder of how easily societies can weaponize fear against any individual.